Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Lust is Boring podcast. For those who are joining us on Facebook Live today, I want to welcome all you guys as well. We got a neat show today. I just received the book in the mail a couple days ago. Started pouring through this thing, and I'm like, this stuff is gold. I got to get this guy on the show. And so we've got Patrick O'Hearn on the show today discussing his brand new book called Parents of the Saints, the hidden heroes behind our favorite saints, over 100 parents who formed great saints. Now, he spent 3 years of research on this thing, and it's going to be a real treasure, I think, for the church. And so today we're going to take a deep dive into that, because I know a lot of people listen to our podcast, singles, young adults, we talk about dating and all that stuff, but there's just many married couples, parents, or soon-to-be married couples or parents, and want to know, okay, how do I get a grip on this whole parenting thing? And so tonight we're going to take a deep dive on the strategies that the saints' parents used to help raise saints. Or what if your kid isn't quite a saint? You know, what do the parents of the saints do then to foster their conversion? Different routines, traditions that you would find in the families of saints. Or what if one of the parents is very devout, but the other parent isn't? How do you raise a saint in that unequally yoked environment? And so we're going to dive into all this stuff today. But before we do, first, exciting news you may have heard last week. Our new book, Forged, just came out for guys on how to defend love from lust. It's not just a book, it's a 33-day program. Every day of the book, you get a free video. Different person every day, from myself, Father Mike Schmitz, Father Jacques Philippe, you name it. We got 30-some awesome presenters that are going to walk you on this journey. We only sell this thing in pairs because we want fathers to do it with their teenage sons, college guy, roommates do it together, so that we got brotherhood, how essential that is, and walk in the pure life. So check out Forge. Just go to chastity.com. It's right there. Also, we got pilgrimages coming up this summer, 2 of them. One to the Holy Land, and then also to Krakow, to the home and the whole land of St. John Paul II. We're going to hike in the mountains where he used to hike with young people. And so I'd love to get some of you know you more personally. So come on one of these pilgrimages. Take a week and a half, explore the Holy Land with us. We got Father Augustino Torres, the CFR priest, is going to join us on both of those pilgrimages. You just go to chastity.com/pilgrimage, and you'll learn about those, or click the link in the show notes. We'll have it there a little bit later. So pilgrimage coming up, Forge book came up, and then also super exciting. If you're watching this on Facebook Live, this is going to happen next Tuesday on December 15th. If you're watching this on podcast, we're going to release this podcast on the morning of Wednesday, December 15th. So tune in tonight. It'll be 9 p.m. Eastern, December 15th. Our ministry is going to have a live webinar where we're going to have guests of Lila Rose, Chris Stefanik, Christopher West, Mother Miriam of the Lamb of God, Matt Fradd, a bunch of awesome other people. And we're going to announce the biggest initiative we've ever done at Chastity Project, and how you can play a massive role in helping us launch this thing that's going to reach more people than ever. And so that's going to be, it's called Chastity Breakthrough. So if you want to go to chastity.com/breakthrough, you can register. The whole event is free. It's about an hour long, but it's going to be a big announcement. And so we're super excited about that. And then lastly, if you want to support our mission here at Lust is Boring, promoting this at Chastity, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Jason Evert. You can contribute a gift of any amount, and that will send you all kinds of free stuff, exclusive content, early access to these episodes, and it just helps us to spread this message to more people than ever. And then likewise, if you're watching this on YouTube, please, like and share, hit the subscribe notification bells and all that stuff. Helps us to spread the message to more people that way. So today's topic, how do you raise a saint? I know as a parent, Christine and I, we got 8 kids, and sometimes you think you're pretty much on track, right? I remember I was our 3-year-old son. He's older now. He's like 8 now, 9 now. When he was 3, he came to me, and he said, "Daddy, I want to be a priest." And I'm like, "Oh, that's great." I said, "Okay, why do you think God wants you to be a priest?" And he just looked at me seriously, and he said, "So I can do everything that God told me to do." I'm like, wow, I need whatever prayer life that kid has. And so sometimes I think you're right on track. I was at Mass with him. He was sitting in my lap. He's maybe 4 or 5 years old. And the priest, he elevates the chalice, at the moment of consecration. It says, "Jesus took the chalice." My 3-year-old, he stopped. He said, "Dad, he took the chalice? We need to rescue it." I'm like, no. Jesus didn't take the chalice. He took the chalice. Kind of had to explain that to him. But just these moments where you just see God breaking through. My daughter Mary once came to me I remember how old she was, like 6 or something. She's like, Daddy, did I ever tell you about the time the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to me? I'm like, no, not like you omitted any news of that private locution we received in our household. So sometimes you think like, okay, we're on this, right? But I have a habit, and I really want to encourage all of you parents to do that. All you young people who hope to become parents, do this. Every time your kid says something funny or holy or whatever, you think you're going to remember it. And like 5% of the time you do. But if you just whip out your little phone, get a little notepad app or something, and write it down verbatim immediately when that little story happens. I've been doing this for years, and I have a Word document that is like 15 pages long, single-spaced of everything amazing, funny, hilarious, whatever the kids have ever done. We've got a lot of little saint stories in there, but then just when you think you're making it, like you get some other stories like these ones that we wrote down. Little Angelica, innocent, age 7, says to me, Dad, Mary took my balloon and she's not giving me any more. And I said, okay, well, what should we do to her? And she said, I don't know, maybe drown her? I'm like, okay, all right, well, no, that wouldn't be the best response here. Angelica came up at age 5, said, Daddy, don't tell the other kids, but I am more special than all of them. But Mary said if I keep any secrets, she'll choke me. I'm like, okay, we need to work on that one too. My 5-year-old recently asked me if it's possible to cuss with your middle toe. I had to clarify with no, it's not possible or desirable. And he also asked me, he said, Daddy, would you get a ticket if you killed someone with an axe for no reason? I clarified, yes, you would in fact get a ticket for that. For his 5th birthday, he said, Daddy, I want to get in the car with you and I want to shoot animals with a nail gun. In particular, I want to shoot cows, jaguars, and baby elephants. Now, we didn't end up doing that for his 5th birthday, but at this point I'm thinking, okay, do we need professional help? When he made a mess in his room once, and I said, okay, you got to pick up these Legos, man. This is a disaster. Just pick up 5 Legos. So after he picked up one, he stopped. And I asked him, okay, come on, buddy, like finish picking them up. He said, I feel sick. And I said, okay, well, we'll go lie down if you feel sick. He said, no, I'm sick of cleaning. I'm like, okay, well, we got to press through that one. He said, when he was 4, he said, Daddy, Luke is my little brother. Sometimes I hurt him, but that's okay. Like, no, this isn't okay. Just a couple last ones here. I told him, Joseph, he's 4. I said, did you know that Jesus used to be a 4-year-old boy too? He said, yes. I said, you know what? I bet he was a lot like you. He said to me, duh. Okay, got me there. That last 2, Joseph, age 3. I wiped him on the toilet. He's all finished with his business. And he looked at me just gratefully and he said, you're my daddy. If you and Jesus fight, you will win. Now, I told him I've actually tried that before. It didn't go as well as I had expected. And lastly, and little Angelica says, Daddy, how do you become a saint? And I said, well, you just say yes to Jesus. She said, I already do that. And I said, okay, well, we'll just keep doing that and you'll be a saint. She said, good, because that's what God told me, because I am going to become a saint. And Joseph at age 4 piped in and said, I'm already a saint. So parenting, there's no really magic formula, right? I mean, I know super devout, awesome, holy parents whose kids have just gone off the rails. And then likewise, I know some incredibly devout, holy Catholic young people, and their parents are the ones who have gone off the rails. It's not necessarily faith by osmosis, right? God's got a plan for each family in a unique manner. But today's author is going to give us some unique insight onto, well, what did they do differently? What were their prayer lives like? How do we send this message to our kids? Not so much by what we say, but how we live. So I want to welcome to the show here, Patrick. Thank you for joining us and coming on Lust is Boring.
Oh, thank you. I'm humbled and honored to be here. So thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit about the book. Where did this thing come from? I remember reading at the beginning, you always had an affinity for the saints and, great love to read their stories. Tell me a little bit backstory of the book.
Yeah, so I was 6 months, had been married, and my wife and I were walking, visiting my parents in Ohio on a golf course, and the sun was setting, and it was like the Holy Spirit just came over me at that moment and said, we kind of been talking about, we wanted to be the best parents that we could be. And just kind of came to me out of nowhere, and it was like, you should do this book. And these signs are just different signs of holy parents. And so as I was discerning and praying about this, I kind of came up with the alliteration, the 7 signs. They all begin with an S. So we start with the sacramental life, and then we have sacrificial, then we have suffering, simplicity, solitude, sacredness of life. And I think I might be missing one more on there, but Yeah, but those were the seven signs that just that I've in reading the lives of the saints too. I've had a great love for them, and but I've always wanted to know about their parents, and so this is just something that the Holy Spirit put on my heart to write this book.
What things would you say that the parents of the saints did differently, to create these outcomes? Not just in the daily devotionals, but like, it comes to the topic of chastity, purity, like what did they do to foster, not just to guard the innocence of their kids, but to foster an actual love for purity and where the kids actually value this as a gift? Sure.
Yeah. One of the saints featured is Saint Maria Goretti in our book, and going back to devotions, that is, it's the love of God that's the key to these parents. They love God more than anything in this world. And with Maria Goretti, with her parents, every night, they would pray the Rosary, and that, I think that literally lit a fire in Maria Goretti, to have from a young age. But also it was her mother. There was one instance where she overheard some of her peers that they were at a well, and this girl and this boy, they had talking about sexual things. And Maria Goretti came back and told her mother about that story. And her mother said, "You must let that conversation go in one ear and out the other." And she goes, "You must never." She also kind of rebuked her and says, "Why did you stay and listen to that?" And she goes, "Promise me you'll never talk about that in the future, those topics." So I think, those hard conversations you have, and Maria Goretti's mother wasn't afraid to put her foot down. But it all began, obviously, I think, with that devotion to God, and then it flowed over from that prayer life, and just having these difficult conversations, not being afraid to be, their mother instead of, their best friend. So,
I remember reading up on the life of Maria Goretti, and when Alessandro stabbed her, after in frustration because she wouldn't consent to his advances. One of the things she said to him before he stabbed her is like, "No, Alessandro, it's a sin. You will go to hell."
That's
and
right.
It was interesting that it wasn't so much like, "Oh, I can't do this because it's against God's plan for me." It's like, no. Yeah. If you try to force me this, you're going to go to hell. And she's not, I don't think, saying that to scare him, but out of love for him. Like, this is what's at stake if you don't value your own chastity as well as mine. And so that wasn't some like spur of the moment, like Maximilian Kolbe didn't become a saint, the moment he gave his life as Auschwitz. This was something that they'd been marinated in this culture growing up.
Correct. Yep. And they, the Gorettis grew up very poor. When I was reading, I was trying to refresh my memory because, I finished this book and there's just a lot, and it's a 300-page book. And so I was reading about Maria Goretti again, and one of the things is she had like a rock and an apple as her, those were her toys. Very poor home. So I think in that suffering, they bore great fruit for their family.
Yeah, just the embracing of that poverty, no matter what state. Some of the saints are kings, some are paupers, but I think God gives you precisely the means most needed for your sanctification, even if it's not the most comfortable.
Right.
Some of these people never would have become saints had he given them certain luxuries or not given them the crosses that he had. Now, in terms of some saints like her, Therese, or whatever, for the most part, were pretty much on track. They had their, personal issues, vices here or there, struggles and imperfections. But what about like the wayward saints, the Augustines, the people that the parents poured out their blood, sweat, and tears? Because Augustine was a brat. Full blown.
That's right.
Reading to him, he got his young woman pregnant. He didn't marry her, and then Monica was following around. I think they were in Milan at the time, and the mom wanted to go with, I think it was Augustine and this woman and the baby down to Rome to get the kid baptized. And I guess Augustine told Monica, like, "Hey, why don't you go up the hill over to that chapel and go pray there for a little while, and then we'll go to Rome together in the morning." So Monica goes up to the chapel. Augustine gets on the boat, takes off to Rome with his friends for the weekend or whatever, disappears, and leaves his mother behind. And so, the soil of his conversion was watered by Monica's tears. So, what do the parents do of these wayward saints? Not just Augustine, but any ones that you came across in your research. Any stories there? Yeah.
It is. So, predominantly, most of my book, a lot of the saints in here that I do cover, most of them lived pretty good lives. I do mention Saint Monica in there, and and with Tertullian, I can't say his name. He said that the blood of martyrs, right, is the seed of Christianity. And I put in my book that it's like the blood, sweat, and tears and prayers of parents is the seed of saints. So just those countless hours of prayers. But a couple of the saints I touched on briefly was Blessed Bartolo Longo, who became, this is very briefly in there, but he became a satanic priest. And it was after his father died, his father appeared to him and said, like, return to God, return to God. And that family had been praying, the rosary all the time. So sometimes even your influence, I mean, we think when someone passes away, their intercession becomes even more important, but on earth, we want to do the best we can do. And one of the wayward ones was actually St. Teresa's sister, Leonie, who St. Teresa's mother said, like, her raising her was the most, it was her biggest cross, because this child was expelled from school 3 different times. And it eventually, and she goes, if it costs me my life, Lord, take my life if it means bringing back my daughter, And sure enough, Zelly would die, I think it's around the age of 45, of breast cancer. So it did. But one of the things Zelly did with her daughter is it changed from the way she was raised. So Zelly was raised, her mother was very strict with her, didn't even let her have a doll. And Zelly was very sensitive, and she suffered from that for the rest of her life, just, being that sensitive soul. So she didn't want to make her mother's mistake. And so she was kind of poured even more tenderness upon Leonie, and just kept hoping, praying. And one of the things that led to her conversion was Saint Zelly's, her older sister became a nun, who was a nun. And before she passed away, she told her, promise me when you get to heaven, you will beg, like, because I think she was cured from, to beg God and all the saints, like especially Saint Margaret Mary, to beg for Leonie's conversion. And sure enough, after her sister went to heaven, like it was within months, Leonie had a change. And one of the changes, it was because their maidservant was actually emotionally abusing Leonie. So I wanted to put that in this book because, we often sugarcoat a lot of the lives of the saints, and to show that even 2 saintly couples, like they missed the opportunity. Their own daughter was getting emotionally abused by the maidservant, and and Zelly was working full time, and with her lace making business. So it just kind of it gives you kind of hope to know that, like, as parents, we do the best we can do, and even the saints, they missed these opportunities, but somehow, like, God, he intervened, and they were able to bring their children back.
Yeah, I think it's so encouraging for a lot of parents to hear, because a lot of times I think we think in our timeline, we think, your kid, let's say, moves out of the house, college, falls away from the faith, doesn't want to come back to church. Sure. And then parents start beating themselves up. I could have done this. I shouldn't have done that. I should have sent them to this school, not that school. I should have done more rosaries. And you just start beating yourself up, like thinking, hey, I missed the boat. But just to hear that, like, Blessed Bartolo Longo, I mean, as you'd mentioned, this guy's a satanic priest. This guy was living a life of absolute debauchery. I mean, he was afflicted with demonic torments and nightmares. And just to know that even after his father passed, I mean, posthumously, still interceding for this kid, like, it's not over. Even after you die, it's not over.
That's
like,
right.
You continue from the other side of the grave, from heaven. And I often say that sometimes people put up walls so high, you have to go up to heaven to get over that. And so storming heaven in intercession of just knowing, maybe you didn't do everything perfectly, but, like, I always say, like, look, who's the best parent in the universe? It's the Heavenly Father. And now look at how messed up all of his kids are down here. Okay, it's not because his dad, he's a defective dad. His kids just have free will and they do dumb things, kind of like we do. And so, not to beat yourself up, to persevere in that prayer. And I often say, like, that's why God picked you for this kid and this kid for you, because he knew that you're the parent that would never give up. And you might not see the fruit of it in this life. I mean, the prayers, the tears welling up like water behind a dam, that thing might not split until your kid's on his deathbed, or beyond. That in purgatory, the graces can still be applied. Sure. And so you just never give up. And so the prayer lives of the parents of the saints, what were their interior prayer lives like? The discipline of their prayer life, the routine of it, the structure, the frequency, the depth of how seriously they took their prayer lives. Like, what did that look like in some of the stories that you read?
Yeah. Okay. And just to go back to your point, because I know, Jason, I really admire, your love to preach purity and chastity. And one thing just with St. Teresa's parents, that they were very strict in terms of modesty with their children. Like, they wouldn't allow their daughters to wear like sleeveless dresses. They had to have, they had to go down to their elbows. And even when their children would walk in the streets, they wanted to make sure in the summertime, a lot of people in France, they'd be changing, and, in the upstairs rooms, you could see people changing. They go, daughters, please keep your eyes, kind of practicing custody of the eye. So I think that was just something I just wanted to touch on, just the importance of modesty in these parents. And even there was a girl that was, she was kind of whispering in one of St. Teresa's sister's ears, and Zélie goes, she called her, Zélie's sister Celine, and said, what's going on here? And then she dismissed that girl and said, you need to go home, because she kind of heard some bad stuff. And that girl ended up becoming a nun. So I thought that was like, hey, this mother is like, she's watching her kids, and they watched every single book that would come into the house. Like, they made sure that their kids were not, as far as, infiltrated with, some impure topics. And it's interesting because St. Teresa of Avila, her mother was flat out gorgeous, and she practiced, loved modesty, but she also liked, books on chivalry. And I mentioned that the book Teresa of Avila was really influenced to a negative degree by reading these books. She started like putting all this makeup on. And then she also had a cousin that was kind of very immodest, and that cousin like influenced her. And so I think the point is, Teresa of Avila was saying it's really important for parents to know not only what your kids are reading, but also like their friends. And I think, and that was something that really struck me on both of those parents, on Teresa of Avila's parents, and just the way she was raised, and Teresa of Lisieux. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for the research you've put into this thing. Because I love reading Lives of the Saints. You just find so many jewels when you're mining away at that. But to do the heavy lifting, to actually research the lives, the literature dig has to be so much deeper in terms of where to go to find all that stuff. So, so back in terms of their prayer lives, what kind of stuff did you find there? Of just like, what do the dad's prayer lives look like? What do the mom's prayer lives look like?
Correct. Yeah, one of the things I found was fascinating. With I'm gonna switch over to a different saint, Saint Gianna Molla, and her parents were Alberto and Maria Beretta. And Alberto would wake up every day at 5 a.m. and he would go to mass. And they lived close to a Capuchin friary. He would wake up and his wife would like prepare him his meal, and then he'd go to mass. And then when he'd come back, like again, his wife, kind of just the servant's heart, would serve her husband. And then he'd go off to work. And then Maria would wake up the rest of the kids, and they would all walk, to a later mass, and they go to daily mass together. So that was two of them. Then you also had like Padre Pio's parents. They went to daily mass, devotions to the rosary. And what's neat about Padre Pio's parents? They weren't very educated. I don't think they could even read or write. And I often think as parents we feel like that this is a daunting task. Like, we must have like I know you went to Franciscan and I went to Franciscan as well, but you don't need a PhD. You don't need a master's from Franciscan University. Although it helps, but like, the most important thing is to get your children to heaven and not Harvard. And, and I think that's, having that deep faith and that devotion, it does pass on. And other things like, St. Teresa's parents, when they were first married, they would walk to make a visit at the Blessed Sacrament every evening. And I'll give you another story. St. Gemma Galgani, her mom loved taking her children to confession. It was every Saturday. It was scheduled. And even when her mother got sick later in life, and she would even have a neighbor take the kids. That's how much she believed in the power of confession. And these saints too. They had spiritual direction. They went on. I'd say even retreats was important. And this is one thing that I think is really key. You have St. Alphonsus de Liguori, one of the greatest saints, and his father would take him on an annual retreat with him. And I'm like, what's the best thing that you can take, your children? We take them fishing, but really the most manliest thing I think a father can do is to take their son to mass with them. And Jason, in your beautiful book, and I actually use that as a source, Jason's book, the five greatest loves, right? Did I get that correct?
Yeah, St. John Paul
Yeah.
the Great is
Yeah,
five loves.
yeah, yeah. And how John Paul II, after his mother passed away, they would go to daily mass together and they would pray scriptures in the evening. And it's no surprise John Paul II's parents' cause for canonization has been opened. So it's these saints' parents. I'll go on a limb and say that I go out on a limb and say that these parents some of them were even holier than their children. So
wow,
yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So parents out there, especially being in the middle of Advent right now, get the family to confession. I think it's a great time to examine your conscience with your family, because if you don't think you really sinned a lot that month, you got 4 people standing next to you that will give you like a litany of your imperfections, to the one. So so it's get the family confession. Another little Advent devotion we've stumbled on is we mentioned this often at the top of the show, the Hollow app that you can get. They now have Advent devotions available on the app. They've got the Advent music. They just added to this. So we get in the car in the morning, just pop in some Advent music. And so we'll put in the footer there in the show notes where you can get this and download it for free for, I think it's like 14 or 30 days to try out the Hollow app. But check that out. So that way you can sanctify the car rides with the kids, pop in some Advent music on the way to confession this weekend. But yeah, most parishes, Saturday afternoons, confessions are going to be available. So get the family there. Now, what about the married couples where they weren't on the same page, where maybe you got like uber devout Catholic mom and super pagan atheist dad or whatever, and mom wants to raise a saint? I mean, that's not just stuff people dealt with in the Middle Ages. I mean, we've got so many families, even that have been separated, whether through annulment or wherever, and one spouse is like rah, chastity, values, God, faith, and meanwhile the other spouse is like totally heading in the opposite direction, and the cross that is for the one parent. Did you pick up any stuff in the stories in terms of those families that were unequally yoked?
Yep. I did, in the life of Saint Martin de Porres, his father, was they called his name was like Don Juan, so which is kind of a euphemism, right, for someone that's Don Juan. And he abandoned his mother. His mother was, she was half African American and half, I want to say would it be Latino? And so his father pretty much abandoned the family, and he, just used, her name was Ana Velazquez. So used Martin de Porres, his mother, had 2 children, and then just took off. And so his mother had, in place that she had to, she took on like several jobs for her son to go to they even sent him to a very good Catholic school. And then eventually he became a Dominican, brother and a saint. But just how, I think she felt betrayed, by the man that she was giving away her virginity to, that he took off. But at the same time, God's grace was there, and she was able to raise, a saint. So that was one of the stories that I had in there.
Yeah, it's kind of neat to hear how messy the saints' lives are, because when you don't read the saints' books and all you see is stained glass windows, it's just like, okay, sorry, can't relate, to that at all. But you start reading them, and you got like Saint Margaret of Cortona. I mean, she lived with her boyfriend, got pregnant, had a baby out of wedlock, never ended up marrying the guy. He ended up dying on like a hunting trip or something, and then ended up becoming a saint and a religious sister and all that. I mean, you've got, I remember reading one saint, I forget the guy's name, but his mom owned a brothel. I mean, his mom ran a prostitution ring, and the guy became a canonized saint. And so sometimes when you start digging in, it's like, okay, there's hope, right? I mean, family lives can be difficult, messy, whatever, but there's hope in the midst of it. So, what kind of stories stood out to you while you're reaching, and just stuff that changed the way you parent, on a daily basis?
Sure.
Because I know when you read these lives, like, sometimes you get these little nuggets and it hits you and it just stays with you, not just for a couple hours, but for a lifetime. So what kind of things do you find that really pivoted the way you parented?
Yeah, there's 2 neat stories. One is, as being a married layman, I wanted to make sure to add those saints in there. So St. Thomas More, and his father was a lawyer, and his father never necessarily, he kind of directed him. He said, hey, you'd be a good lawyer, but didn't pressured him. Thomas More at one point was going to be a Carthusian monk. But Thomas More loved his father's blessing, and it said he would walk in front of his dad. I think his dad became a magistrate, and he would walk in front of his dad's office every day, even if it was from the balcony or outside. He would ask for his father's blessings. He would just kneel down, and his dad would give him a blessing. And I think as as men, as fathers, being the domestic priest of our home, it's something that I've done is, just, when my son goes to bed, I give him a sign of the cross. I put my thumb on his, on his forehead, and I give him a blessing. I try to, use holy water. And that's something that really stuck with me, just how the importance of a blessing is from a dad. And we see that also in, when Saint Therese went to the convent, she asked for her father's blessing, and he was in tears. And he's like, of course, I would love to give you that blessing. So that was really, that's something that jumped out at me. And the other thing was Alberto Beretta, Saint Gianna's father. Like every time when he would come home from work, when they'd have a family dinner, they'd all sit down together, and he would ask about the children's day. And if there was any, if the kids were acting up, he would correct them. And he just loved being present with his children. And I think in our day and age, there's a great temptation where we don't even have family meals, and we don't even know our children. We're spending more time watching TV than we're with our kids, and our kids vice versa. And he knew about his children, and then he would go afterwards, after dinner, he'd go smoke a cigar, and his one of his children would play the piano or the violin. And that really struck me, just to really get to know my kids. I told my wife recently, when I come home, I put my phone in the drawer, and if I put it on, if there's a phone call, I'll pick it up, but like texting, I'm just going to wait for my son to go to bed. It's more important that I give them the time that they deserve. As my friend Devin Schott, who he's a good friend, he says, give your children FaceTime, and the real FaceTime,
the real time, not on the phone. But it's interesting when you mention that blessing. I remember a year or two ago, I spoke at a men's conference, and there are probably 1,500 men in the audience, and I said, I'm just curious. I've never asked this before. Could you just raise your hand if your father blessed you? If your father physically put his hands upon your head, traced the sign of the cross upon you, and gave you his fatherly blessing. How many of you have received that in your lifetime? Over 1,500 men, I could literally count on one hand how many men in that room had been blessed by their fathers. I mean, and this is diabolical. I mean, with no exaggeration, because when you read the patriarchal blessings of the Old Testament, of the fathers upon the sons, conferring the birthright and the blessing, like something's going on here ontologically that changes and bends the shape of history of that child when the blessing is conferred upon him. And you read how, like, I bless you and this is going to happen in your life and that, and boom, it happens. Like there's something going on, not only in the blessing of a priest, but in the blessing, as you said, of a domestic priest of his father. So we have to place our hands upon our children. And I think they like just the touch of this whole thing, the hands, the holy water, if you got incense, whatever, but they need to feel the blessing of the Father. And sometimes when we haven't been blessed, we just don't think to pass it on. And so I think it's an awesome point. And another question I wanted to bounce off of you, I know that, like, you mentioned that Therese's parents actually weren't first interested in married life. They wanted to enter religious life, but didn't work out for them. And so I think a lot of people are kind of in that boat of like, hey, I got my eyes set on this vocation, but it doesn't end up materializing. And, I know a lot of good, awesome Catholic couples where that was their story. They thought that this is what God was calling them to, but he was calling them to sanctity, just as much sanctity, but in a different vocation. So maybe speak a little bit about that, but sometimes his plans are different than ours.
Sure. And that's what, that was a game changer for me, because, I spent a few years in religious life, and, I was a Benedictine monk, and there was kind of a bad situation in our monastery, and a lot of us had to leave. And I wasn't, leaving because I felt called to marriage at the time, but eventually God did call me to that. But I read Saint Therese's mom, Zélie, and she was in tears on her wedding night because she wanted to be a nun so bad. And her husband understood this as well, because he wanted to be a monk, and he had troubles with Latin. And then he had some illnesses. And so eventually, God brought them together. And it wasn't until they started having kids, I think it was the first year of their marriage, they decided to be celibates. And this priest goes, no, you need to, this is a gift. You need to welcome saints into this world. And, they didn't waste any time, and they had, 9 children, and then 5 of them became nuns, and they lost 4 children. But I think that when Zélie started having children, she just said, like, I don't regret getting married. She just felt like the greatest joy. And she's like, all she wanted to do was have kids. Like she was almost in tears when she was in her 40s, when she found out she couldn't have any more kids. She's like, because her greatest joy. And I think that it's important for people that are discerning too. It's like, God also, he knows the desires of your heart. And he's, often like we feel like when you discern out of religious life, you feel like your vocation isn't good enough being married. And it's a total lie. And that was a part of the reason in writing this book, is because I wanted to show the world that these parents are really the hidden heroes behind their children. And Saint Therese said something that it struck me when I was in the monastery, and it was like one or two things I remember the most. And often we read the Gospels, it said, whoever leaves husband, wife, mother, and children, and will get land, right, in 100-fold in this life. And Saint Therese says, no, this is about parents who sacrifice their children to become priests and religious. And I'm sure it goes both ways, but it just shows you the sacrifice. And I think in our day and age, like God wants saints. This is, and so when you're called to marriage, don't ever think that your vocation is a second rate. It's needed, and we need saints more than ever.
Yeah, and I think there's any good time of year to meditate on that. It's Advent, just because redemption came through the family. Like that was the weapon that God used to overthrow the very kingdom of darkness was the family. Not a program, not an institution, not the family. That's the machine that he used. And as you were mentioning, the saints and the struggles that they're going through. Marriage isn't easy. Marriage is pretty darn messy, obviously. And I remember you mentioning in the book of just how the saints were able to embrace the crosses of their own life in order to foster their kids' vocations. And so some of those crosses may have come earlier, as they're going through those vocational struggles. I remember reading once where there was a young guy who's thinking of becoming a priest, but maybe get married. And he was actually friends with the Pope and this bishop. I don't know if it was Pius XII or what it was. And eventually this kid chose the married life. And then the bishop regretfully informed the Holy Father and said, I regret to inform you that the young man ended up choosing the trap. And the Pope corrected him right away. Like, we have 7 sacraments, not 6 sacraments and a trap. And so regardless of what vocation you're called to sanctity. But one of the means by which God sanctifies spouses is through their suffering within the vocation, of which there's plenty. I think it was Francis de Sales said, marriage is the greatest form of mortification on earth, whereby opportunities to die to yourself are more frequent than in any other vocation. So what did you learn in your research in terms of how the saints harnessed the power of redemptive suffering within their vocation for the sanctification and vocation of their kids?
Sure. Yep. And, with John Paul II's fathers, he lost his wife, and then he lost 2 out of his 3 children. And it said he found his outlet in prayer. His grief was transformed in prayer. And, I put in my book that the greatest lesson that John Paul's dad gave him was really how to suffer well. And you could see that carried on in John Paul II's, in his pontificate throughout his whole life. And, in another saint I talk about is Saint John of the Cross. And his father had married a lady that was below her class, and John of the Cross's father was pretty much denounced by his own parents. So here he grew up, his marriage they were totally poor, and he had trouble providing for his wife. And I think that led to John of the Cross to be able to embrace the cross, because he saw I think he was only a few years old when his dad died, but just that heroic, the ability to suffer well was clearly passed on to him. Other saints in there was I talk about Saint Jose Maria Escriva's father, and his father was cheated out of his business. They went from super wealthy to living in an apartment, and he ended up becoming a salesman. And even his Saint Jose's seminarian brother was just shocked that he'd see how his dad had aged, because he'd be standing all day, and he ended up dying very young. And Jose said, I always saw my father with a smile on his face. He knew how to suffer with joy. And so these parents are that's how I think the greatest lesson they communicated to their children, outside of the devotional life, was how to suffer well, how to embrace the cross. And that's why you see Padre Pio, even St. John Vianney, whose parents are mentioned in there, they were able to carry out their vocations because their parents gave them that first lesson in the in that domestic classroom, the school of suffering. So
no, this stuff is gold. Honestly, I can't wait dive into this thing. I'm just going to be bringing it in the morning to Mass and reading it a little bit before or after. But tell the people where they can get a hold of this if they want to get a copy for themselves, or Christmas coming up for family or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Jay. You can find it on my website, Contemplative Heart Press. And also Amazon. You can find it on both. There's a Kindle version and also the paperback version. And it's kind of neat. Just to add real quick, one of my friends, Sister Bethany Madonna, who you know on there, she's a vocations director, and she gets a lot of girls that come to her and say like, I don't know if I'm called to religious life. I kind of want to get married. And she goes, get married, go change the world. It's like, so I think that, when you read these saints, these parents, that they definitely they inspire me. I kind of wrote it to teach me how to become a better husband and father. So.
Yeah, well, thank you for the gift. I think this is going to be to the church. I mean, I can't wait to dig into this stuff and just little insights and stories, and you can't not be touched when you read this stuff. And so, thank you for coming on. I'll also put a link in the show notes where anyone can just click, go over to Contemplative Heart. Is it contemplativeheartspress.com?
Press.com. Hey, Jay, and I want to just put one more plug in for you. And when my wife was in 8th grade, her mother took her to a chastity talk in a small country parish in Wisconsin. And you were mentioning something about pray a memorare, and my wife did that. And then her mother went out and got her a purity candle. So, I thank God that, that God used you and Our Lady did to bring that message to her. And, because of God's grace, both her and I were able to be, pure on our, to live a life of purity and chastity. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you for that. I had no idea. So glory to God. He's the one who's able to do all this stuff through us, or despite us in many cases. So, but thank you for the gift that you are to your family, to the church. And as I had mentioned earlier, if anyone wants to support this ministry, check out patreon.com/Jason Evert. Check out youtube.com/Jason Evert. We take all the clips from these different podcasts, throw it up on YouTube so you can share those with other people as well. And then don't forget, if you're watching this live, it's going to be next Tuesday, December 15th, a live webinar we're going to have. Or if you're listening to this, we release this episode on Wednesday, December 15th. Don't miss the event. It's going to go chastity.com/breakthrough. Biggest project we've ever launched at Chastity Project, and we are super excited what this potentially mean for the church and how you can get involved and help us turn this into something beautiful for God. And so God bless you. Thank you for coming and listening to the show today or watching it. Don't forget to get a copy of the book, Parents of the Saints. Patrick, thanks for coming on today.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason.
All right. God bless.